my fellow comic book collectors, it's Alan, the Comic Collector Geek, and this video I'm going to be talking about how everyone was wrong about the comic book market. There's been a lot of doom and gloom, and I see it all the time where, people are selling their comics and they're they're just getting out of the comic book space. There's a lot of channels that are talking about how prices are falling and the sky is falling. We're all gonna die. It's like the market is like totally dead. And I sort of kind of came into this video because of the fact that I was watching Swagglehouse. And Swagglehouse did a video where he was talking about the down report that Key Collector Comics put out. And the idea is this, that the market is dying and all the big keys that we kind of like think about are fading in value. And that has really caused a stir where all of a sudden people are like, wow, these big books, these like giant size X-Men, Amazing Spider-Man 300 or whatever, those really, really big keys that everybody kind of gravitates to, well, they're selling for historic lows, even lower than pre-COVID prices, which is insane. So that kind of makes you wonder, are people just giving up on comics? Is the space dead? And that's kind of the feeling that I get in the community, that that there's a real paranoia that there is not going to be a comic book community going forward. Well, I'm here to say that you're all wrong, and that I actually have a prediction that the comic book marketplace is going to go into a very major shift from being a buyer's market, which we're currently in, to being a seller's market, where we hope to be in, especially if you have books that you want to sell. That is something I think will happen in the next 8 to 10 months. I see it because I see a perfect storm of events happening that really are lining up for that to happen. What we always see within the comic book space is that we see these shifts from boom to bust, boom to bust. And right now we're in the bust era. And part of the reason for that was the economy. The economy right now is very weak. Despite whatever the media might try to tell you, it is very weak. People are suffering, and I can see it. We have massive inflation. We have low productivity. We have people that are, under earning as well. Like the wages haven't gone up. People are really suffering, and I see it all the time. I feel it all the time with my own business. So the thing is, people are suffering, and when they suffer, luxuries suffer. So generally what happens is when people don't have extra money, they don't spend on luxuries, obviously. And that's why it's a perfect storm right now of a buyer's market where people are just selling because they need the money to pay their bills, to buy food even. It's like, this is, people selling out of desperation. And that corresponds with the rapid inflation. So we've experienced within the last 3 years, maybe 20 to 30, maybe even 40% inflation, which is insane amounts of inflation. Now that inflation has gone parallel with the comic book prices dropping by anywhere from 60 to 80%. I've seen some books drop that much, where they went from those COVID highs way down to pre-COVID prices. Well, those pre-COVID prices were not adjusted for inflation. So what you have is actually those prices are even lower now than way before COVID. So maybe 2014 prices or 2012 prices. So because if you adjust for inflation, that's really what we're seeing, that these prices have tanked that much. That being said, that creates a buying opportunity. right? What really, anyone that has money can make money by buying up books, pennies on the dollar, basically. I've been taking advantage of that myself, maybe a little bit too much. I spend too much on comics, but the point is, it's hard not to resist opportunities when there's so many books available. So right now, the economy is bad. However, there is a shift in the economy, and I do see this happening very soon. Recently, there was an election that was held, and that election has brought in a very different ideology than the previous administration in the U.S. The U.S. kind of is the only country that really matters. I know, like, I'm saying this as a Canadian, because the U.S. really determines what the world is doing. Like it or love it, that it is what it is. Like, the U.S. drives the rest of the countries. I see how my own prime minister is kowtowing to the Trump administration. And, the funny thing is, Trump is actually forcing our Canadian government to do what Canadians wanted them to do. It's the craziest thing, but it's a good thing. So Trump has always been a very strong player for the economy. And I really do see things improving within the U.S., reducing regulations, reducing government waste, encouraging more people to, get back into the workplace and make more money. That's all very positive things. But that takes time. Usually it takes about 6 months. For the U.S. market is actually very fast about recovering. It's amazing how resilient it is, but it usually takes about 6 months. So I'm thinking January, Trump gets in office, then it takes about 6 months for it really to, so all these ideas that he's putting into play really to, ramp up. 6 months. So then people will start having a little bit of extra cash. I'm not saying they're going to be rich overnight. It's not that quick. But a little bit extra cash does a couple things. When people have a little bit of extra cash, they don't need to sell. They don't need to fire sale their stuff because they don't need to sell. They have the money that they need to survive. So what that does is it takes a little bit of the supply off the market. What I've been seeing is a lot of books that have been put on the market that you would never see. Like, these are extremely rare books that you only see when people are desperate. They sell a big book in order to, get some money. And you sell a book that is a little bit rarer because that way you can get bigger money than if you sell something that's a little bit more common. Like, there's only so many AF-15s you can sell before the market tanks on it and you won't get your money back. But if you sell some more obscure book that people are, still willing to pay up for, then you can do well. So that's generally what I've seen in this buyer's market, where you're seeing people selling the more obscure books that are very desired, that usually stay in collectors' hands and never see this daylight. They're just held in a vault somewhere. Well, I saw a lot of those books coming up to market in an unusual amount for the last year or two. So that will shift. Those books will start drying up. The demand for those books will increase. The demand for even big keys will kind of increase because there won't be the supply that we're sort of used to. And that's just a shift from people being broke to having just a little bit extra money, that they don't have to have those concerns anymore. That cultural shift is a huge thing. The economic shift, I should say. Another thing that I've seen, and this is something that I see within that time frame, is a shift in the culture itself. This was happening long before the election, but you see it very strongly happening, where people have been really upset with the movies lately. And really, I always hear that, the quality of movies is really bad and stuff. And for some of that I agree with. that the quality of writing is really bad. The actual, CGI and the way that they make the movies is quite strong. You can tell that there's real talent in Hollywood for making movies, but they make really bad movies, but that look good. So generally, what I'm seeing is a shift in that culture where they're moving away from movies about a message, pushing some agenda, to movies that are entertaining. Um, a good example of that is Wolverine versus Deadpool, where you see this movie is maybe not the most intellectually stimulating movie in the world, but it was driven by trying to entertain the audience and catering to the audience and really appreciating the fans. Before that, you get movies or TV shows like She-Hulk, which the nemesis for She-Hulk in the series was the fans. It's like that's how much the the culture has shifted from really Hollywood hating the fans that built up these franchises to re-embracing the fans, not just with nostalgia bait or stuff like that, but actually telling them stories that entertain them. So I see that as a big shift. You hear stories both within DC and Marvel where they are focusing on maybe not putting out as much stuff, but producing better quality and really even stopping certain productions from coming out because they just don't think that the fans will enjoy them. That's a big shift. But we won't really see the effect of that shift until next year. And there's always a lag between when they kind of they start listening to the fans and when we actually see the movies, because they have to take 8 months to actually start producing those movies. So generally we'll see that mid next year again with this other thing with the economy. Now we got the movies and the culture itself shifting. Another thing that has happened with this cultural shift that I've seen definitely happening very rapidly is the move away from DEI. You see Walmart, for example, openly saying, "Hey, we're not gonna do the DEI thing anymore. We're gonna just hire people based on merit," which is a good thing. It doesn't matter what you look like; hire the best people. Well, within the comic book space, they were really embracing the DEI philosophy and hiring people based on their skin color and their gender rather than their merits as a writer, what they're asked. I don't blame them for taking up that opportunity, but there's probably better people that are, could have done the work better, and that's really all the fans are asking. Get good writers to write good stuff. Like the guy that did X-Men 97 is a black guy, did an awesome job awesome job of writing. It's not about skin color, it is about merit and talent. So focus on the people that are actually producing good stuff, let them do their work. Don't focus on things that are not as important. I don't really care what they look like. I just care if they're writing good stuff. And books don't have to. They don't have to have that story that is inclusive. And what I mean by that is a lot of the time they were doing writing that was based on really just trying to appeal to every audience out there. Oh, if I don't see myself in the book, then I won't like it. Well, that's not true. I think most people, can understand a good story, and they you don't have to, have every little group being represented. You can actually just tell a good story that has universal appeal. And that's something I think there's this cultural shift that I do see happening. that once they realize that, that they don't have to appeal to everybody, but because sometimes when you try to appeal to everybody, you appeal to nobody. Um, well, I see that, once they realize that, the fans don't like this, or I think they are realizing that, what's going to happen is you're going to find stories that go back to the basics, just telling a good story. We're already seeing that with both Marvel and DC. They're putting out their various Ultimate series, which are being embraced by fans. They're doing new takes on characters. It's about good storytelling, and people are embracing it as a result. I'm actually hearing stories of people not just buying things based on a cool cover, but based on a cool story, and that shift is huge. And it really takes time to rebuild that trust with the fan base. And again, that plays into why I say 8 months down the road that I see this perfect storm of it becoming a seller's market again, because it takes that much time to rebuild the fan base and the community's trust in the comics again, that they're not going to be preached to, but they're going to be told good stories again. And it is what it is. It just takes that much time for that trust to be rebuilt. So as I'm trying to create in your minds here, I'm trying to show you that there is this perfect storm of events that are happening that are really going to build up the market. So another thing that I really want to get into is during the COVID time, we got this massive spike. And when you get this massive spike and then a corresponding major massive dip in the space, what happens is there's this feeling that, I'm selling these books, or you're selling these books, and you didn't get your money's worth. And that kind of creates this feeling of regret that you sold them for cheap. They're books that you probably liked because you probably paid up for them during COVID or whatever, or you've had them in your collection for a long time and you've given them up. And what happens is, just like I had this experience when I was younger, when I first met my wife and I went with her to Korea. What happened was she wanted me to sell my comic book collection because she didn't want me to lug this big collection around, especially if I'm going halfway around the world with her to live in Korea. So she was like, "Oh, sell it off." So I sold it, like a portion of it off. I sold some of my bigger books, and I sold my complete run of Sandman, and I sold a bunch of books that now I regret having sold. I think people are going through that same seller's remorse, where the last year or two, where people had to sell because of financial reasons, or moving out of the hobby, will now regret that decision and say, "Oh, gee, I really missed that book. I really wish I kept that book," and will want to re-put that book in their collection again. So people will be buying back their own collections, basically. I always think about the Black Cat collection, where this guy, he had an amazing pre-code horror collection and Black Cat collection. And he basically regretted selling it. He had sold the whole thing, and now he's trying to buy it back up. I do feel like that's going to happen, especially as people have more money that they can feel like they don't really need to sell. They're going to want to rebuild what they gave away. Really, they gave it away during COVID, during this down market, that they really undersold the books. So I really do see this seller's remorse kicking in, as I said, around that same time when the economy kind of shifts, where people are being like, "Oh, I should have kept those books." Especially if there's any uptick in the market, that seller's remorse will kick in even more. Well, they'll be like, oh man, I sold it for $100, now it's worth 200, where it's sort of recovered. It's gonna be a definite thing where people are gonna have that seller's remorse, and then that creates that feeling of FOMO where they feel like they're gonna miss out on something that they already had. Definitely, I see that as happening. The other thing, so that's something I think will happen, as I said, as the economy kind of shifts. With all of this, I kind of got into it a little bit about the inflation and how inflation has kind of skyrocketed. Currently, the inflation is kind of getting sorted out. There's still a lot of inflation happening, but what has happened is the wages have not caught up to the inflation. Well, that is actually very typical. Doesn't matter who's in office, doesn't matter. Inflation precedes wages generally. So what'll happen is wages need to catch up to the inflationary rates because people have to live. It's just the thing. People, will demand that they get paid more regardless. And so what's going to happen is there's going to be a wage inflation within the next year as well, where people's wages that have sort of stagnated will now catch up to the inflation rates. And so what'll happen is, people will sort of get used to what the new prices of things are, but they'll also have the salaries to justify those new prices as well. So like what was worth $1 now, maybe was it 10 cents 40 years ago or whatever. Well, that dollar will be seen like as parity. Like it won't be the situation where we feel like, oh man, it's so expensive. We will see it as that's just what the price is. And we won't think of the prices as being super, super high anymore. We'll just think of them as being, this is the new value of things. And there'll be almost like an acceptance of the inflation, which sounds weird. I don't think there'll be actually a deflation. Generally, deflation is really rare, but there will be a rapid growth in people's wages, just to kind of catch up to the inflation within the market. And what'll happen is people will look at the comic book prices because they really haven't adjusted for inflation. Actually, they've been going down while inflation's been going up. And they'll say, oh man, these books are dirt cheap. they'll look at the prices and they'll sort of say, okay, wait, in these dollars, this is really cheap. It's sort of like, when I was a kid, I remember my parents' house. It was like a really expensive house at the time. It was like $300,000. And that was considered crazy amounts of money to buy, to pay for a house. And it was a big, big house. The same house now is like $2-3 million, like it's just like, but like when I think of a $2 to $3 million house, I think, oh yeah, that's a reasonable, reasonably big house, a reasonably, and if I think of a $300,000 house, I think, wow, that's a cheaper home. And it's just the way our perception can shift, where we kind of get used to the new prices of things. So that's why, like, Action 1 selling for $1 million. Well, if $1 million is worth about $100,000 in today's money, then you sort of have this perception that, hey, that's a bit of a steal. It's a bit of a good price, even though it's a big number, because the numbers have been shifted now, where things are inflated numbers. So the point is, I think people will look at these prices of comics and they'll see that they haven't really adjusted to keep up with inflation, and people will be like, oh, these are undervalued. especially because they are undervalued. They're below pre-COVID prices. Definitely, will create that feeling that these things are very affordable. And also, we still have that perception of what the prices can be. We know that they could go up to X dollars, whatever they are. We saw how high books had gotten in COVID. We might even start to see that those prices, even at the peaks of COVID, are considered kind of low compared to the inflationary numbers. Like if you look at the value of how much books went up during COVID, there were certain books that went up 10x, and now they've since corrected. But I think of many books that kind of went up that much, where you'd get it one week and then you'd flip it for double the next week, and then that person would buy it and double it again. So you get this kind of weird doubling effect. So that is a huge a huge spike within, like, whenever you see these trend lines, it's like like this crazy trend line. But the point is, that spike might actually not be considered as big of a spike once you start incorporating inflation. If things have gone up, if we had like 20% inflation for the last 3 years, well, that means that the value of things has either doubled or tripled or quadrupled. It's really gone up that much. That those spikes during COVID might not be considered as big. The prices might not be considered as high, especially if people start getting back into the market again. So, you might see, COVID pricing as being kind of in line with what people are willing to pay for comics again. I think that's a bit far out, actually. Personally, I think it's maybe 2 to 3 years out that it'll take that long to recover to those COVID prices. But I do see the prices going back up to those numbers. And it might have felt like it was going to be a longer recovery than that just a few years ago. Like just last year, you'd say, oh, we'll never get back to COVID pricing. It might be 20 years away. It really did feel like that. But because of these inflationary situations, and because of the shift in the economy, and things that will bring back collectors into the market space, I think it's not that unlikely we'll get to those COVID numbers again. And if not, we'll see new records within the next 2 to 3 years. I do see it shifting, as I said, within the next 8 to 10 months to a seller's market where the inventory will dry up, and you'll see a shift in the way people think about selling their comics. They'll be more willing to hold on to their comics, but the full recovery will take longer, is really what I'm trying to get at. So yeah, those are some of my ideas. I hope that this perfect storm of events comes true. I'd like to see the market recover. Even though I enjoy the buyer's market personally, I really do. It's great to pick up things on the cheap. But at the same time, you kind of want, the market to recover. We, as a collector, it's always nice to know that that this hobby will be around for a lot longer. I don't want to see it die. I do enjoy it. There's one last thing that I want to sort of mention is I see a big shift within the comic book community itself, where there's so many new YouTube channels. I'm impressed by all the people that are creating YouTube channels for comic books. And I talked about this in the past, where we are ambassadors for the hobby. And the more people that are talking about the hobby, the more people that are promoting the hobby, the better. So I actually see the fact that there are new YouTubers promoting the hobby as a good thing, because it gets the word out. So that's one thing I wanted to quickly mention, that I do see this positive thing where there's people that are promoting the hobby and real interest being driven to the hobby. So I hope you think about all the things that I said. Don't get stuck on me talking about certain people, and people get all upset about that kind of stuff. I don't don't focus on that. Focus on what I'm really trying to convey, which is these shifts that are happening, and they are positive shifts for the comic book community, and those positive shifts will result in it going from a buyer's market to being a seller's market. So I'd love to hear your feedback. What do you think? Do you think that we're that the sky is falling, or do you think I could be possibly right, that the market will shift sometime next year? So again, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye for now.